raise your hand if you can hear me, because I can see. Okay, great. We're going to go ahead and get started. Apologies for the delay. I think everybody's learning how to work in this virtual world, which might help us for a long time to come. So thank you all for being willing to participate in this, the city's Small Business Recovery Task Force. We know your time is very valuable. You all have a lot going on as small business and business owners and participants in this new recovery, and we're appreciative of what you bring to the table in terms of your experience, your insights, and the data that you have that can help the city of Charlotte as we look forward to how we can help our business community move forward with their own recoveries. So for anybody who's watching this meeting this morning, we invite you to participate by watching the presentation. This is going to be available on our Facebook page going forward, but also you can submit your questions that we can share with the committee. And the email address for that is?
Yeah, it's our Charlotte Supports Small Business at Charlottenc.gov. And again, let me give it to you one more time. Charlotte Supports Small Business at Charlottenc.gov.
So again, I want to thank you. The mission of this group's work is to provide guidance to the City of Charlotte on how to best support our business community's recovery. In particular, we're going to focus on small and medium-sized companies that are essential to the future of our city. And so the committee that we have organized is seven people from the business community that we wanted to keep it a manageable size. And so the 7 individuals represent as much as possible the broader community, both the demographics and the various industries that are important to Charlotte. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody. We have on the committee, our sector leaders are Sarah Baucom from Girl Tribe, co-founder and owner of Girl Tribe, Malcolm Coley with managing partner with Ernst & Young, Dave Matthews is the Chief Information Officer from Bank of America. Vinay Patel, President of SREE Hotels, LLC. Mark Vintner, Chief Economist for Wells Fargo. D'Alva Wilson, Small Business Advisory Council Chair. And Chad Turner is with the LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and he is going to be taking Ann Sheridan's place with Compass Group, who had some personal matters come up. So we appreciate Chad stepping in. And we hope that Compass can participate at some point in any of our further sessions. We also have on our committee our city council members, myself, Julie Eiselt, I serve as Mayor Pro Tem and an at-large representative, James Mitchell, who is also an at-large representative, and unfortunately he's under the weather this morning, so we hope that Mr. Mitchell is feeling better and can join us again next time. Dimple Ajmera, an at-large city council member, and Tariq Bakari, who is our District 6 city council member. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to start with our chief economist from Wells Fargo, Mark Vintner, who's going to give us an overview of what he's seeing in the economy and the data trends that he's following, and what kind of an indication that might give us for the work that we're undertaking. And from there, we're going to have our assistant city manager, Tracy Dodson, give us an overview of the state of the economy from the city's perspective. And then we're going to get right into having our panelists, the 7 sector representatives, give some insights as to what they're seeing from their business perspective and what they're watching. We'll go around and ask for those perspectives. And then we're going to go back to ask those individuals again what they want from the city, what the needs are, what they're seeing, what the expectations are, and how the city can help. And that will help shape the task force action for our subsequent meetings. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark Vintner, if we have him on the line now. Mark,
yeah, sorry about that. We've been using Zoom, and evidently have tried to jump through all the hurdles to get that approved. I don't have this one approved. So anyway, I'm going to go fairly quick in terms of where we're at in the economy, and actually we're feeling better about things. Not feeling great about things, but feeling better about things. I was a little surprised. I mean, the news this morning, Georgia's trying to reopen their economy, reopening parts of their economy. I think it always comes across as they're reopening the whole thing. It is a very staged opening. But what struck me a little odd about Georgia is they are probably in the South the least prepared state to reopen their economy, whereas North Carolina is the most prepared state. And that if you look at the guidelines from the University of Washington in terms of what they really like to see is the number of new infections per million be less than one new infections be less than 1 per million, which the University of Washington thinks we will be by May 15th, maybe even sooner. And that, so there's this sense that we're changing from talking about shutting things down to talking about opening things up. That sense of direction is real important. That's one of the reasons that I think the stock market is firmed up, because the stock market is forward-looking. And the other thing that is encouraging, we're coordinating with our biotech analyst, and which we have some of the best in the business. And there's a lot of progress being made on therapeutics. And we are likely to have 3 very significant therapeutic treatments for COVID released by the end of May, which will make the disease far less lethal and allow for even more businesses to open over the summer. So I think that progress on the vaccine is also being made. We hear a lot of conflicting things about a vaccine, but I would say the best information that we have, Moderna, J&J, Pfizer, all look pretty promising. 12 months out, they should have enough for first responders and healthcare folks. A year to 18 months seems like, for the general population. It will not be until we have a vaccine that we start to see things get back to normal. In terms of what's happened with the economy, we had a strong start to the year, January and February. Business began to turn down the first week of March, and then it really turned down after that, and it turned down enough that it wiped out and offset all the good things that happened in January and February, at least numerically. And that's what happens when restaurants go from being packed, as they were on the last day of February, to being thin, to being empty, and being closed. So it's a 100% wipeout of a pretty significant industry. And then you saw that throughout leisure and hospitality, administrative services, and ambulatory health care. In all, we're looking for about 430,000 jobs to be lost in North Carolina this year. That's kind of a loose number because it's kind of, most of these jobs are hourly wage jobs, because the way that the employment data is put together is if you do not show up for work and don't earn any hourly compensation and you're paid by the hour, you're counted as unemployed. I'll give an example. If you work at Starbucks and your Starbucks is closed and you can't go into work, you'd be counted as unemployed, even though you still work at Starbucks. And so a lot of these job losses are likely to be temporary, but even looking at Georgia, restaurants are going to open up, I believe, on Monday. So seated restaurants will begin to be reopened. But I think that you can only have 20% of the stated fire capacity seated at any one time. You have to have social distancing. I have no idea what the protocols are for wait staff and how, if you go from one table to another. I don't know how that is done. But all of those things have to be worked out. And they've got a pretty broad list. I mean, going all the way down to hair salons, nail salons, massage parlors. I don't know if that's the right word for massage places, but whatever. But they've got the long list. But I reading through the governor's text on that, I'm not quite sure that they're reopening to business, to customers. I think they're reopening. Some of those businesses are only reopening for administrative tasks, in order to position them to open. I don't think they're reopening to accept customers. So a lot of what was said on Georgia, I think, was a little misleading. Go ahead and flip through the charts real quick. In terms of you're looking at the growth rate in the case, it's best to look at the logarithmic scale, and it is leveling off around the world. Most states are leveling off. North Carolina, the curve is clearly leveled off here. A little less so. I mean, when you get to denser populations, which is one of my question marks on Georgia. So in Atlanta, which 20% of all the people that come into the United States from outside of the United States come into the Atlanta airport, and that it's more than any place other than New York City, and that's with 3 airports in New York. And so, it didn't surprise me that Atlanta had a pretty bad case count there. I wonder about big cities. I think big cities are going to be tougher to reopen than smaller cities, and Atlanta's a big city, but they're doing it. So at least the state's doing it. Charlotte should be a little bit better. We're not as dense. We are more dense than Raleigh. So go ahead and flip to the next one. Jobless claims 22 million over the last 4 weeks. It does look like they peaked on a weekly basis. State unemployment agencies are getting caught up. Money's flowing, so that's helping. It's helping revive some activity. Go ahead and flip to the next one. This is the monthly change in employment. We did have a big drop in employment in March, 700,000 jobs. We're looking for it to be 30 times that in April, so 21 million jobs to be lost in the month of April. So it's going to be a much bigger number. Go ahead and flip to the next one. Next page. This is leisure and hospitality. You can see that in recessions, leisure and hospitality, hotels and restaurants for the most part, also includes amusement attractions. So Carowinds would be in here. They don't tend to fall that often, and they don't tend to fall that much. About a third of the job losses that we've seen have been in the hospitality industry. And we're probably going to get a big tranche again because the way that this employment period covers the second half of February, first half of March. The April will cover second half of March, first half of April. That will be the biggest block of layoffs. Go ahead and flip to the next one. Retail trade had been struggling previously. A lot of the big box stores have been closing. I am worried about the malls. I do think that I don't know that the major department stores are going to make it out of here without some major cutbacks. I do think that Charlotte probably, given our stronger demographics, high incomes around South Park, relatively new mall up toward the lake, I think we probably have less trouble with that than others. But Macy's is going to have some real problems. And if you lose a big anchor, then the other merchants have the right to walk away from their leases with no penalties. So, it's a real critical question that we're going to see there at the shopping malls. Go ahead and flip to the next one. Healthcare employment, something that hardly ever declines because of the ban on elective surgeries and the growth in telemedicine. We've seen a huge cut in jobs here. You would expect that when this reverses that it would just reverse. I don't think it will. I do think dentist offices will reverse, but I think that telemedicine is going to be here to stay. The healthcare industry has been incredibly inefficient, particularly from an administrative standpoint. And I think you're going to see automation move in there in a major way. And I don't think we're going to see many of these jobs come back. So we will see a rebound, but we're going to see, so maybe we get 70% of the jobs that we lose in healthcare. Again, this is about a third. Healthcare is the second largest area of job loss after restaurants. We lost more jobs in healthcare than we're losing in retail. And there's a lot of administrative jobs in there. And I would say that we probably will get 70% of the job losses back in the healthcare sector. Probably about that same in retail too, and probably about 70. Yeah, it's probably about 70% in all three of those categories. Go ahead and flip to the next one. Go ahead and flip past this. I'm going to speed up here a little bit. Charlotte's fortunate in that a lot of the industries that can be done from home happen to be big here. Financial services, 57% of the jobs in financial services can be done at home. Professional and business services, a lot of the growth in the tech sector, information, the tech sector, even manufacturing, a lot of those are sales related to manufacturing. And a lot of that's here. That's because of the airport we have. It's their national numbers, but just give you an idea that we've come out better than some because of the composition of our workforce allows more people to work from home. On the flip side of this, jobs and leisure and hospitality, where the bulk of the layoffs have been, very few of those can be done at home. And they also don't tend to have any benefits. They don't have any support. And it even gets a little bit worse in that rents for a lot of those folks have been rising, not necessarily the commercial space, but rents for those workers have been rising faster in the last couple of years. And so there's a lot of pressure facing displaced workers in the hospitality industry. Go ahead and flip to the next one. I want to get to the small business stuff here and then stop there. So flip, unemployment's going to get 15% or more. Go ahead and flip past that. Small business optimism has come down. It's still historically fairly decent, but this isn't the end of the decline. I suspect that we'll probably probe the lows that we saw in the financial crisis. Go ahead and flip to the next one. NFIB did a special survey asking small business owners how long they could last. They said most only had financial resources to last 1 to 2 months. It was before PPP kicked in. 75% said they could only last 3 to 4 months. Even with PPP, I don't think there's a whole lot of resources there. Go ahead and flip to the next one, which gives you some idea. In North Carolina, 890,000 small businesses is classified by the SBA, employing 1.6 million people, 44% of the workforce. Kind of reiterating that, 44% of healthcare and social assistance. That's healthcare and social assistance. That includes daycare, home healthcare, things of that sort. But 44% of that industry is small business. Accommodation and food service, which is mainly restaurants, 59%, but certainly hotel operators are small businesses. About a third of retail stores are small businesses, a little more than a third of manufacturing, and about 85% of construction is small business. Lots of subcontractors in there. So that is it's a wide segment there. I would say that construction of this group is probably faring the best right now because a lot of work started in January and February. But there's a lot of issues with construction. I mean, it's an industry that social distancing may be easier to pull off. I've seen some articles. They say, well, hanging drywall is kind of hard to social distance. You can't have teams. If you have teams, that works pretty well. But really, anything you do outdoors is going to aid. Anything that's done outdoors would be better because most infections are spread indoors, not spread outdoors. So it's, the overwhelming majority of infections are spread indoors. So if jobs that are done outside are going to be more easily done than jobs that are done inside. I'm going to put the next slide. Looking at what's happened with PPP, we have had a lot of loans approved. A new program like this is not going to come off flawlessly. I would say that it's pretty ingenious. For a lot of companies, it's going to turn out to be a little bit of a windfall because they're going to be able to keep their employees. They may have been able to do that anyway. For others, it's going to be a lifeline, and for others, it'll be a missed opportunity. And it's unfortunate. But given the time constraints, I just don't know. How it could have been pulled off better. In hindsight, you're always going to say it could have been done better, but it needed to be done quickly. And in terms of coming up with a workable plan that would help a lot of businesses, a lot of nonprofits, this is accomplishing that, and it looks like they're going to re-up it and get a little more cash in there. Go ahead and flip to the next one. This is a little breakout by industry. It kind of mirrors that breakout, and so construction has got a lot of dollars in there, but remember 84% of small businesses, of construction firms are small businesses. Professional, scientific, and technical is pretty broad. Third of manufacturers are in there. It's difficult because I know that folks, you would like to think that everybody that needed this loan would get it, and I wish that was the case. Hopefully we can re-up it, and hopefully it'll get a lot more people these loans. Go ahead and flip to the next one. It's just consumer confidence. It's taking a hit. Not surprising. Go ahead and flip to the next one. Just a little bit of data here on restaurants. You can see they're down 100%. This is from Open Table. Some pretty good data. We've got North Carolina in there, and you can see how it turned down relative to other states. We didn't turn down. We weren't the first to turn down, but we all ended at about the same spot at the same time. And down 100% is down 100%. As restaurants reopen and we go from 100% seated dining being closed to having 80% closed, that's going to bring a lot of jobs back. It's going to bring close to what we lost, but it's going to bring a lot of jobs back. I think that restaurants are going to need some help because it's not just that they're going to need help convincing people that the protocols that they put in shape and in place are going to work. How are we going to place tables? How are servers going to interact? How's the food going to be prepared? How safe is it going to be? Because it's not just getting the businesses reopened, it's also restoring confidence in people to go out and engage in the economy. That's going to be very critical. Go ahead and flip to the next one. Flip past this one. Flip past this one. Flip on. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. We're going to go all the way to the local stuff. Keep going. I'll just say something on apartments and housing real quick. Charlotte probably has the third highest proportion of apartments currently under construction as a share of its stock. We might be second, we might be fourth, we're right around there. We're going to have an oversupply of apartments. They're mainly going to be in the luxury lifestyle apartments, downtown, South End, Noda. Vacancy rate might pop up to 12% for a short period of time. But I think construction is going to ramp down pretty quickly after that. The big problem is that we're not going to have as much net job growth for the next couple of years, so there's not going to be a lot of absorption. In terms of single-family home building, January and February were awesome, so we got a lot of work in the pipeline. We're going to see that'll continue over the summer, but new starts are going to slow because buyers are going to be a little hesitant. Go ahead and flip to the next one. And I've only got a couple left here. Flip. Go ahead, pass this one. Pass this one. We were doing really well in terms of population, job seekers moving to Charlotte, second only to Austin. Go ahead and flip to the next one. Looking at jobless claims, 540,000 jobless claims in North Carolina. I'd say about 40%, somewhere between 35 and 40% of those. That's the last 4 weeks. We're in the Charlotte metro area. Go ahead and flip to the next one. This is our estimate of job growth. 426,000 jobs lost this year. And we expect to regain about 60% of the jobs that we lost by the end of next year. And it really depends on if you look at calendar year in terms of the job loss or average annual, because the job losses are going to be plans out there. But that's, in terms of credit quality, it has gotten up because there's been a rush for loans, and so banks are going to be more selective when that happens, and so credit scores have come up, and I don't know when that will begin to really turn around again. Typically, when you go into recession, you have a little bit of a lead time, and when we went into this year, nobody had recession on their forecast. So credit was pretty loose, and then all of a sudden, bam, you got a recession overnight, so credit tightened much more abruptly than it would normally. And it only ease as we hear more about an economic recovery and see more things getting better.
Okay, now that's helpful. And then one quick question on the commercial side. I looked at a couple of studies, and they said between a third and 40% of the leasees didn't make their April payments.
Yeah, that's true. And we don't know how many of those just missed their payments, how many worked with their landlords. In a lot of cases, and one of the things that we're seeing in new commercial development, when we're getting, especially in urban areas, is that the retail and the commercial aspect of an office building or an apartment building is more of an amenity than it is a true profit-making venture. And so typically the landlord has already been working with that entity. They weren't necessarily making their full or a market rent payment in good times. And so there wasn't an expectation that they were going to make it in bad times. And the question is, who's working with who and how that works out. But it's often looked at, hey, what amenity can I add to this community that's going to make it more attractive for my bread and butter, which are my office tenants or my apartment tenants. And so, given that we're in a recession right now, I'm not surprised, there's going to be a large number that aren't making their payments, but I think that most owners knew that, and they're working with those folks. But
Thank
I
you.
can't tell you how many are. I just know that that's kind of the state of the industry.
Thank you, Mark and Malcolm. If we don't have any other questions from the panelists at this point, we're going to go. I'm sorry, Councilmember Ashmira has a question?
Sure.
Councilmember Ashmira, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, my question is around the trend. I know we have seen a trend of folks, especially seniors, downsizing. But do you see a change in that trend with this pandemic from sort of folks downsizing to staying in single family homes with larger square footage?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's too soon to tell. It is. I think in the very near term, the housing market's stuck. I mean, nobody really wants to put their house on the market. I spoke with realtors this morning. Listings are down about 80% in Charlotte from where they were a year ago. But this is like the peak season, but people don't want to list their homes right now. And so I do think that folks will probably want to stay in place a little bit longer until this settles out. But as I said at the start, I have every expectation that we're going to see therapeutics developed in very short order. I've got a whole list of where we are in different therapeutics, and I think that we're going to have a vaccine in 12 to 18 months. And so when we move past this, there may be a little lingering fear that, hey, what's the next virus to come along? But I don't think that. I think that people are going to want to go along and simplify their lives and work with what works best for them. So I don't think we're going to see behaviors change that much, but it is certainly going to slow that process down as we move through this. This crisis is going to last, almost 2 more years.
Thank you all.
Okay, with that, we're going to turn it over to Assistant City Manager Tracy Dodson, who is going to give us a little bit more of the economic data for the city, for Charlotte proper. And then from that, we really want to turn it over to our panelists and hear from you all for a few minutes on what you're seeing in your respective industries.
Yes, and Wendy, if you can pull up the one slide that I sent you. I'll go over this pretty quickly because I think that Mark hit a lot of these points. But if we look at businesses of 50 people or less, that makes up 93% of the businesses in Charlotte, which is about 40% of the jobs in Charlotte. And if you look at the top right of that screen, hitting some of the industries that Mark talked about, like manufacturing, 50%, or excuse me, almost 82% of manufacturing companies within Charlotte are 50 people or less. In the retail trade, 91%, almost 92% of companies in Charlotte are 50 people or less. Healthcare and social assistance is almost 93%. And so it gives you a little bit of clarity around small business and the impacts, I think, within Charlotte as we're talking about this. We did have a conversation yesterday that I think is important, is how do we all define small business? Is it 100 or less, or 50 or 25? I'll hit really quickly as well on just some of the efforts that that we're doing that we know about that are local. And the first one is the micro business grant that the city approved last week. We're hoping to launch this week. I know that information that's needed for the applications is already available. Also, the county did 2 different programs as well. We continue to monitor our partners who are helping to counsel small businesses as well, and Chad can speak a little bit about what they are doing, but constantly checking in, how many companies are you able to service? We've had some people reach out to say, how can I help support hotlines and things like that. And then the last thing is we launched an Open for Business campaign last week, and we've had over 350 businesses already sign up to be a part of this. And that's really to help people as they are pivoting, get the word out, let people know, or also business to connect, to help each other kind of guide through this time. So those are just some of the things that we are trying to do locally to move through this. But I think I wanted to set that out there as we talk about what are our next steps and what do we look like coming through the recovery.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. With that, we're going to move on to our roundtable insights. And I'll call on each one of you to share your insights for a few minutes, as to what you're seeing in your business, in your industry, and what you feel might be on the horizon. So I'm going to start with Sarah Bauckham, who is the co-founder and owner of Girl Tribe.
Hi, thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Okay, so Girl Tribe, we do a couple of different things. We have a storefront in South End, and we also do large-scale events featuring small businesses. So we're seeing things on obviously the retail side, and then also on the event side as well. And so we've seen both of that take a hit. I think right now, one thing that has been kind of going around in circles are, as we're seeing, Georgia and South Carolina open up for different, industries. Okay, so if and when that comes for us, how long are we going to have, especially when we have a customer facing business like a storefront or nail salon or something like that? How long are we going to have to basically prepare? Because at this point, we're, some of us 5-6 weeks have been closed. So basically, our storefronts are not ready for customers. So I think that's a concern that's coming up. And I think, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but I think also it's kind of, what are we going to do? How are we going to protect our customers? How do we protect ourselves? Are there going to be some type of city regulation or just even a one-sheeter on how to clean effectively, that kind of thing? Those things are starting to go around in our small business circles. And I think that the grants and the funds are all great, but I think a lot of us are just, okay, that's awesome, but the next step, how do we prepare to get back to it, is really what's going on in our circles currently. Yeah, so that's kind of the main thing that's going on right now, especially as we're seeing the other states open up around us.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. I also want to make a comment that Mayor Lyles is with us on this call listening in. She's double dutying it on other calls as well. So thank you to the mayor for joining us this morning. After Sarah, we're going to go to Vinay Patel. If Vinay was not feeling well, I don't know if he's still with us. Are you there, Vinay?
Sorry, am I unmuted?
Oh, there you go, Vinay. Yes, and Vinay is president of SREE Hotels Limited.
We've been talking about hospitality and restaurants. Our hotels literally dropped 90% across the board. The industry dropped 90% across the board. There's still some occupancy out there, depending on, especially the extended stay side of the business. we've got locations that have some military programming going on in there. But, restaurants, I think Mark said it best. I mean, they went 100% down. So the good thing for us is we didn't shut anything down. We've got all of our 24 hotels still up and operating. We still have all our salaried employees working. The hourly folks are the ones that took the hit. If you were working 40 hours a week, you might be working 8. But we just needed to keep our managers on board, and it's going to be interesting. The cleaning procedures. I know somebody said, safety, and that's kind of what I've been talking about. Is how do we promote safety? How do we promote clean? How do we promote it's okay to get back out? The restaurant industry is putting out cleaning criteria. I know the hospitality, the brands have already done that. What do we need to do? How do we clean? We're doubling down on all our cleaning procedures at all of our hotels. So, as we come out of this, I think from a safety security perspective, we're going to be better prepared. But how do we get that messaging out to the rest, to the traveling public?
Okay. Thank you, Vinay, and we hope you feel better. Next, let's go to Chad Turner, who is the chair of the LGBT Chamber of Commerce. And Chad is also representing a lot of affinity groups of chambers. There's 4 under that umbrella, and then 23 different organizations that represent small businesses. So Chad's got a lot of perspective into what folks are saying within those organizations. Chad, can you hear us?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
So since March the 23rd, the LGBT Chamber, the Black Chamber, Carolina's Asian, and the Latin American chambers have been taking calls and fielding emails from the community, and we also set up a hotline that's open from Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. for small businesses under 50 employees and unemployed individuals from those businesses. To date, we've taken over about 3,000 calls. We're fielding close to 150 a day. And with that information, what we're learning is about 18 to 22% are hovering around closure. About 20 to 30% are closed due to mandates. And then we have maybe around 15 to 20% as of yesterday that are sitting with less than 2 weeks of cash flow to continue being open through the pandemic. The major purposes for the hotline sort of morphed into assistance with SBA, North Carolina Golden Leaf, and now the city and county loan programs to help people in small businesses under 50, especially minority businesses, women-owned businesses, to navigate the application process, get the forms that are needed, and also advocate on their behalf to the city and county and state to make sure that the hurdles that they would have to climb to get these particular offerings would be at least equitable and fair. And that ranges everything from credit to documentation that's needed in a number of years in business. Our calls have not slowed. They've gradually increased without any type of real advertising of the hotline. And we have an entire volunteer staff that is fielding the hotline plus the emails. And we plan on installing a chat client this week to assist with that.
Chad, can you give us the number or the email address for the hotline? Because those who are tuning in might want to have that.
Sure. So the website is supportclt.com, and the hotline number is 704-837-4050. The hotline and the website, the information there is updated on a daily basis at 9 a.m. So everything is correct. All the links are correct. It's vetted. We go through the applications to make sure nothing is broken, make sure something is not a scam. We verify with the BBB. So the site is up and running full steam every morning at 9 a.m.
That's great. Thank you, Chad. The next person we're going to have speak is Malcolm Coley, the managing partner of the Ernst & Young office here in Charlotte.
Hey, Julie, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
So as we begin to plan, what does current state of COVID looks like, and then getting to post-COVID. So we're thinking, I know there's been some conversation 12, 18 months that there could be a vaccination, some type of therapy that's out there. We think it's overly aggressive, but what does it look like? So we have set up a command center that's going to advise on logistics of how do our workforce reentry. We believe that when it does happen, it'll be in phases. So it could be starting off with 3-day work week for a period of time to 4-day work week. But before we get to that point, we would definitely need to evaluate and understand our workforce. Who are the vulnerable ones? And they will be work from home. And then those that can go into the workplace. And then once we are able to have reentry into the workplace, what does that look like? We'll have, screening and et cetera. But before we get to that point, my business, we're a lagging indicator. We tend to come, much later the impact. So the impact that we felt to date has been minor compared to what other industries have been impacted. And when we look at our different, service lines, on the audit side, those are things that are statutorily required. There's not much can happen there. And we do have the ability to do that from afar. On the tax side, we're beginning to feel some part of that. Typically, tax continue to expand because people are making money. When people start losing money, there's not a lot of tax strategies. On the advisory side, typically a lot of that is discretionary dollars, unless it's really necessary advisory related work. And some of those projects are well on the way, so they can't put the brakes on those. But the big part of our practice about ready to really blow up is on the transaction advisory side. We're beginning to see and getting calls of prepackaged bankruptcies that's going to happen. There are going to be boatloads of bankruptcies that we see that are going to happen. But as far as the profession, a lot of the smaller regional players are really feeling the crunch. I mean, we're a cash flow business, and a lot of the smaller players didn't have strong balance sheets, and some of the larger players didn't have strong balance sheets. One of the big four, their partners are taking a 50% pay cut currently, as well as putting a number of their people on furlough. So we believe probably in the start of the third quarter, all of the professional services firms are going to really take significant steps in maintaining the business through reduction in workforce and et cetera. But as a business, again, we're laggard indicators as to the economy. And then how do we do business going forward is going to completely change. One of the things that we realized is all the investments we made in technology would be utilized in a much more robust way. If I could put things in perspective, pre-COVID, I averaged 225 people a day in Charlotte from other cities. And even though our revenue is beginning to feel the crunch, but we've been able to deliver without having our people, our clients, and my bringing 225 people into the city of Charlotte every day. One of the things I realized in this past year, I purchased over 30,000 hotel rooms last year. I can tell you now, if I purchase half of that on a go-forward basis, how do we redefine our business? I'll be surprised. And so that just have a filtering effect in airline tickets and restaurants. Because, in order for us to be vibrant, we have to have a vibrant workforce, because if my workforce goes down and my profession goes down, then the capital markets goes down. And one thing we got to have is a capital markets in order to keep the economy up and running. So laggard indicators, the way that we would do work going forward is going to completely change. We will most likely in the next 2 years will not allow our people to be in large events. And we're defining large events as 50 or more. And so for the next 2 years plus, until there is a vaccination and we can feel comfortable that we can safeguard our workforce, it's going to be not much different than where we're operating now, where a great majority of our people will be using technology and working from home.
Okay, thanks, Malcolm. That's interesting information from all of you. The next person we're going to have is Dave Matthews from Bank of America. Dave, can you hear us?
Yep. Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
We can, thanks.
Okay, good. So just a quick way of introduction. I'm one of the CIOs at Bank of America. There are multiple of us. But ultimately, I look after a lot of the enterprise technology, so I cover across the gamut of all the technology functions inside the bank. So let me quickly talk about the bank itself and then maybe some observations around technology and how we might see things changing. So obviously right now, like all the big banks, we're pretty busy, a lot of work going on supporting CARES Act, PPP, pretty active. And obviously the markets have been pretty busy recently, so a lot of activity around just keeping the technology world moving. Obviously saw the announcements that came out from Brian around, no reductions in force regarding COVID-19 and so on and so forth. And I think as a bank, compared to where organizations were in the 07, 08, 09 period, things are feeling much more secure. Although, as you obviously saw from all the results the big banks published, large amount of bad debt provision going on for what we think will be inevitable, failures of organizations and companies that we lend to, unfortunately. As we look at technology, I think a couple of interesting observations there. One is that, essentially technology for our organization, everybody's work from home, and so that was a pretty seamless process. But I think coming out of that, a couple of things as we start to think about coming back into our office space. We have moved heavily into collaborative workspace. That is not a great ideal environment when you think about containing risk around something like COVID-19. So much more open plan, people working together, clustered, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we're going to think very carefully to the points that were being made earlier about how people come back in the office, who comes back in the office, and also the configuration of our office space. And that's particularly prevalent in the technology area where we've moved into agile workspaces and things like that. We've got that sort of much more clustered environment. And that doesn't actually feel good to our employees, and they've already been raising that. So certainly an area there. I think if you were to look at any organization and you think about our BCP planning, our business continuity planning, I think all of us have learned lessons out of an event like this, because things that we thought were extremely well buttoned up did not necessarily work the way we expected. When whole countries go out simultaneously, it can have an impact to the way you think about it. You can think about a city-based BCP plan. If City A is not there on the East Coast, then I've got the West Coast. But both East and West Coast simultaneously shut themselves down. Interesting set of conversations around how do we think about protecting in the future from that. And I think that will have an impact a little bit on the technology workforce as well. And I sort of categorize it into a couple of different areas. I think most large companies that run big technology organizations use a mix of resource types. And I think from talking to peers of mine, as well as inside our own organization, there will be a thoughtful progression to how much more do we need to control directly, which, could have a longer term positive impact on Charlotte, quite frankly. And then I think, behind that, we were already struggling to get tech resources inside the US. Obviously, things with H-1 visas and things have been shutting down. So I think the good news is that there will be reductions in budgets. I think that's inevitable across the industry, especially in smaller companies. I do think that will put all roles at risk, including technologists, but I do think there will be larger organizations who, like us, will be thinking about how we operate and will potentially suck up that spare capacity. So I think if, out of all of the industries to be in, technology, like most of them, has an ongoing, it is also a lagging indicator to the point being made. But as I talk to friends of mine and colleagues and other companies, smaller companies, at the moment, there's no reduction in budgets and plans for what they're spending money on technology, although there is an acceptance that the focus and prioritization of how they spend those dollars may change. Okay, so I think, you know, as a big organization like B of A, it's obviously difficult to put yourself in the shoes of a small company and how they're operating. We're obviously trying to work very hard to support our clients, and you know, we've certainly, you know, a lot of drawdown on loans and things like that from all of our clients to keep their businesses running. I think really for us now, it's back to the points that people are making earlier about is how do you get the economy moving again? How do you get people back out and feeling confident? Because it is all about confidence. You know, 80% of the US economy is driven by consumer. So if the consumer's not spending money, everybody struggles. If the consumer starts spending money, things move forward. So again, I think it's really going to be about, and I think coming back to the point someone else was making earlier around, you know, is there something that Charlotte can do that certifies this company, this restaurant, this place is doing the right things to make itself protected and protect you as a consumer? I think those are the sort of valuable things that will come out, because if we don't have confident consumers, then pretty much your economy is going to just basically take a massive hit. The last point, and going back to the point that was being made earlier, and I'll disagree slightly about the travel, because while I agree, in the short term, I think that's exactly right. We'll have the same sort of restrictions around large groups and all the things you talked about. I also think, based on, you know, what has happened from 2007 and back in the 2000s, and I'm getting old, so I remember every time we've had a recession, we have short memories. And so while we may see a hit for the next 18 months, I think certainly if the vaccine does come out, I think we will head back to where we were very quickly. And I think actually travel will pick back up. I think hotel room utilization will pick back up, and so on and so forth. That's a little bit of a personal opinion, but as we talk to companies in that space, obviously that's their hope. But as I look inside our own organization, while this year travel is going to be minimal, next year probably fairly low as well, it will pick up again inevitably as the economy picks up. Let me stop there.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. And the last panelist we have is D'Alva Wilson, who is chair of the city's Small Business Advisory Council. So she also has a perspective on a lot of the small business activity and outlooks here in Charlotte. So D'Alva, welcome.
Thank you, Julie. Yes, as the chair of the Small Business Advisory Council, we have representatives from all of the diverse chambers in the city, as well as the Native American Association, Asian American Chamber, and the Black American Construction Organization, and also there's a Native American one, but we have a very diverse mix of representatives of small businesses and who represent organizations with bodies of small businesses as members. And so what we started galvanizing or working on a COVID response around March 17th. And initially, we wanted to be all things to all people, but ultimately decided to focus on policy. Our charge as an organization is to advise the council and staff on businesses in Charlotte with a particular focus on small business, and we felt that policy and really looking at policies that may have been prohibiting business or an ease to do business in this new climate for small businesses may have been the easiest thing for us to do, or most effective thing for us to do. It wasn't easy, but most effective thing for us to do at that time, and that's where we focused. And we have worked with the council, thanks to all of you for your support and movement and approval of some of our recommendations. We initially put forth policies to impact all small businesses, the airport concessionaires, as well as the food truck industry. So things like permitting or some talk around sales tax, what can be done there. And then also even looking at some of the participation goals for small businesses going forward for projects where there's an investment of city dollars. So some of those conversations are ongoing. Many of the policies that we recommended have been approved and implemented or moving forward. So that's good news. Going forward, we're going to focus on the restaurant industry, micro businesses, the gig economy, and hospitality and tourism as it relates to policy, to see if there are any policies there that could be shifts or changes or amendments to policy that the city can absorb at this time. We also realize that a lot of things for the city are dependent upon sales tax income that is steadily increasing and is expected to continue to decrease over the period of time. And so there's always a balance to these conversations. But we do believe that there are some things that still can be done from a policy standpoint. I've also had some conversations with the county around policy, and some of those things are moving forward as well. We've also shifted our conversation to some of the most vulnerable businesses in our community, really looking at what some of our neighbors may need in terms of funding. I know that the micro loans are available, and that work is ongoing for the opportunity areas. There's still a number of gaps for us across the community for all businesses. So as those are focused on companies in opportunity areas, then of course there are gaps for those companies that are not in those areas. But then as you look at the information that we're now learning around who has been able to participate or receive SBA funding, significant gaps again for those in our community here in Charlotte and businesses that are deserving. And so I think there is definitely a need to look at, the question was about data earlier, the kinds of data, really understanding who in our community applied, who received, who did not receive, and what were some of those reasons. Because I think a part of what we have to do also is help prepare our businesses who were not prepared this time to understand what some of those needs are and how to be prepared going forward and to be able to sustain going forward. And then, of course, as much as we can, impact some of those decisions around how even some of the decisions were made. Because if you look at who received the dollars and also look at the definition of the small business, the SBA definition of a small business is companies with 500 employees or below. That's not what we typically feel as a small business. And so there's some disconnect as it relates to what is happening versus what some of our businesses actually need here in the community. Some of the other things that we have been trying to guide some businesses on that we're involved in is really understanding for some of our more vulnerable businesses, they're relying on a hearsay network a little bit too much. And so there's a lot of information out there. And so really getting clear information and succinct information. I just recently learned about Chad and the website. So we've been pointing people to that website. There are others who also do a very good job of really synchronizing and aggregating data, the information, so that it can be vetted information that is more reliable than sometimes a hearsay network, because sometimes it's really based on a person's experience. But we find that that's what's happening now in some cases. So I think that is something, as we really seek to help businesses be more sustainable and have really good information to move forward with. That's something that we have to move forward with. I'm hoping that the work that we're able to do will be somewhat of a phased approach. I think there's a need to look at some short-term assistance that may be needed and maybe have a sense of urgency, because as we all know that there are still gaps there around a lot of our businesses that could be better equipped and a little bit more, have a lifeline with a different pool of funds outside of the mandates or the guidelines around SBA. I would really like to have that conversation and see in our meetings going forward, we do shift the conversation and really bring it down a little bit to ascertain as what we can do now for businesses and how we can have a sense of urgency around some of the gaps that we know that are there for some of our businesses going forward. And then I think the other thing that if there's information, there's a way to get to this, is really understand and look for what are really the demands going forward in terms of the market of some of our small businesses. Will there be shifts? Will the market needs change? And really, what are those expectations around demand so that we can prepare businesses going forward? And then how do we help businesses understand how to navigate society going forward without us really understanding what that is going to look like ourselves? But I think we can all say that there will be a new set of norms. So how do we prepare them to navigate that safely for them and their employees, but also minimize liability as they open back up, and they open back up to customers? There's some are concerned about liabilities there. So really helping our companies navigate that a bit as we learn more. Again, I don't know if there's anybody who can actually answer that question at this time, but I think those are things that would be helpful if this recovery task force could focus on going forward.
Okay, thank you, Dialva. Thanks to all of you for sharing that insight. What we're going to do next now is give you all the opportunity to ask any questions of each other, and just take a few minutes because we do want to wrap up by noon. And then hopefully going forward, we'll keep the meetings as short as possible while we get the technology glitches worked out as well. So we'll go ahead in the same order again, or if you just want to raise your hand, Donata will let us know if you have a question. You can address it to the panel, and then combining that with also, to Dialva's point, tell us what kind of data and what kind of support you would like us to focus on and bring back with questions for the next meeting, so that would be more helpful to kind of shape the conversation going forward. So go ahead if any of you want to ask questions. Do we have hands raised on the computer? Or if you've got a question, I can see you, so raise your hand. Tara can, okay, Malcolm, how about you? Go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, one of the things I think would be very important for small businesses is sort of a command center that can advise them on logistics of workforce reentry. And I know most small businesses won't have the resources and capability of this. So is this something that the city is willing to provide this competency, sort of as an umbrella for small businesses? And so the command center, as I think through it, will follow the mandates of state and other governmental authorities regarding timing of reentry into the business community.
Okay. That's great. A great question, Malcolm, and we'll work on the capabilities for that, and also what other partners are out there that are doing that could help us achieve that initiative. Who else is on that's got a question for the rest of the group? Do you have another one, Malcolm?
I was going to, Dr. Yele Aluko, who's EY's chief medical officer, who's helped driving our global or our America's reentry program. He's more than happy to work and volunteer with the city to share best practices.
Thank you. Okay, we'll reach out to Dr. Aluko. Appreciate that. Well, let's just go around again then and have each one of you just comment on going forward what you would like to see come from this task force and what each one of you might be able to share with each other, if you can do that. Do you want to start with Sarah, if you're there?
I'm muting myself. Yeah, I actually love today. This is so informative. I think for small businesses, a lot of this information would be so helpful just as maybe a little bit more condensed, but especially when Mark was speaking, there were so many statistics that I think that so many people would get. Maybe it's just a little more hopeful, I think, than maybe we're hearing on the news. And so if there's any sort of way to share that in a more condensed way, I mean, I know we're all really busy, but if there's like a bullet pointed kind of thing, so it's just really, really understandable when it comes to what these big companies are planning on doing too, because I think we all will either try to or at least look to follow suit. So I'm not sure if I have anything else to really add to that. I just really appreciated all the information today and look forward to kind of seeing where this goes.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. How about Vinay? Are you still on? Okay. How about Chad?
Yes, I think that one of the largest concerns for us is making sure that minority-owned and women-owned businesses have equitable access to any of the offerings from the state and the county and the city. So city-specific here is ensuring that we're taking a look at who is receiving the loans through the current block grant program for the corridors, and understanding that we're getting those first come, first serve, and who's having the largest obstacles there. Also, one of the concerns of the Latin American Chamber of Commerce is that none of our application processes are translated into Spanish. And so that considerably puts the Latin community far behind in the process, because they have to go line by line with someone from the Latin American Chamber or someone that can assist with that. And by the time they get everything that they need and they get through the process, they could either be at the end of the line or the money is dried up. And that's the same situation with the SBA, with the North Carolina Golden Leaf, any type of grants. There just seems to be zero translation to Spanish right now in these areas, and I feel like that's a large sector in our community. And obviously Rocio Gonzalez over at the Latin American Chamber can speak to that if anybody has any questions. But it is something that we're seeing is a major concern, and I think we need to address that from the city level. Anything that we offer being translated into Spanish. And finally, understanding that through our research or through our calls, what we've received is about approximately, based on numbers as of yesterday, about 40% of the businesses that are 2-week cash flow or a little bit more prior to closing really need anywhere between $15,000 to $35,000 to float through this particular time period. And that would be what we did was we did an estimate with each call that called in with that specific issue. And it looks like the end of August is most of those. And that's just to keep their buildings, make sure utilities are paid, make sure that they can take care of product or take care of a couple of employees, or if it's a sole proprietor, take care of what they need to take care of just to be able to maintain and open that door when we do reopen. I think taking a look at what we can do as a city to look at helping as many people as possible with as few hurdles as possible, and being fair and equitable in that process.
Thank you, Chad. How about Malcolm? Anything else?
Hey, one of the suggestions I would have is that we look at this sort of as in what's the current state, and over the next 12 to 18 months, and then what does post-COVID look like 18 to 24 months from now, and then really have an honest discussion about the true assessment and state of affairs of small businesses. I mean, I think we have to be realistic. Some of them are not going to come back. And then what do we need to do to help those that truly has an opportunity to come back in the form of resources, counseling, mentoring? How do we help them dissect their business on how to move forward in the new world that we all going to exist in? How do we work together and just really helping them survive in this in the new world.
Okay.
And so I would love to see, and then what are some of the other ills that have come out of this process? One, the inequities in the economic side of society and small businesses through how the whole PPP worked through the financial institutions. And then two, we'll be remiss if we don't look at the healthcare side and the inequities in healthcare amongst the most vulnerable population.
Thank you, Malcolm. Dave, any comments?
I think that more from the bank perspective is really what we can do to help folk, both from, using our workforce to help if that's appropriate. Obviously, we're very focused on our clients right now, which includes a number of the small businesses in Charlotte. But, I think our problem set is going to be a little different than the small business world. And so I don't want to mix the two together. But anything that we can bring to the table to help, I think, is vital. I do think as well, it is important that we don't lose sight of the longer term growth of Charlotte. We've got to get ourselves back on our feet. But a lot of the work that have been going on, some of the stuff that I've been involved with the CFH and some of those things, I think are still very important. And we don't want to lose that momentum that we started again in terms of jobs coming into the area, particularly, higher paid, non-hourly paid sort of roles. And so while we need to get through this, let's also just make sure we don't lose sight of what we were trying to do with the city and continue pushing that agenda in parallel as well.
Okay, thank you. Dialva, if you have just a minute, because I want to have Mark share any thoughts he has too before we wrap up.
Sure. I'd like to see us continue to be forward thinking and do things differently. I think if we don't do that, we're going to get the same outcomes that we've already gotten. We understand what the social determinants are. We already know what the issues are that are facing them, our most vulnerable businesses. How can we move forward now, take that information and put some actionable goals and objectives in place to fill the gaps for some of them and close the gaps that way? I think Chad just shared a very good example, even something as simple as having the application translated. Can we go ahead and begin to think about those types of things so we don't see them in the results in terms of even with things like the micro grant? Because I would like to hear, if we have time, even hear what the response has been to that with the $1 million that has been opened up from the city. Again, it's not going to close the gap, but I would like to understand what the response has been to that, who's responding, have there been people approved, et cetera. But if we don't do things differently, we're going to get the same results that the SBA got for the same reasons that the SBA got the results that they received. And so I think we already have a lot of information. We know a lot about what is impacting what some of the issues are with some of our most vulnerable businesses. And I think it's our responsibility to move forward with that information and to actually do something about it.
Okay. Thank you, Dialva. And let's wrap this up with Mark, and then we'll just talk real briefly about what we want, from the next meeting. So, Mark, do you have any comments to close this out?
Sure. In terms of the most immediate thing, I think that we probably need to get together on some ideas on best practices on opening up, because that's what's going to be happening very soon. I think that's going to be the most immediate need is what are the best practices on opening up, and how can we help provide some sort of guidance to boost consumer confidence to get so that not only are the businesses opening up, but people are feeling better about going to those businesses, because that's likely to unfold in the next, I would say, 3 to 6 weeks. That's pretty immediate. The other thing, though, is that we need to look at resiliency. We need to look at what can we reasonably accomplish that will make small businesses more resilient in the future. What are we missing that would make them better able to withstand? I mean, a shock like this is hard for anybody to withstand, but other shocks that we have. I mean, we have weather shocks and other things that can take people offline. So we need to find some. We've been thinking about what we could do to boost resiliency, which might be something that the city needs to add or beef up. And then the last thing that is transportation, because a lot of our hourly workers use public transportation. There's a lot of questions about sanitation of public transportation and how we can make that safe. That is the second greatest transmission mechanism for the virus has been public transportation, and I really wonder, because light rail is such a positive for us. I mean, we don't want to lose that, so we need to figure that out, and it's also a key element in how the workers are going to be getting to work. So those are the three things I thought of.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, everybody. That gives us a great deal of information to work with. What I really like is that we've got the full spectrum of perspectives with this group. We've got Bank of America, EY, Wells Fargo, that are large corporations, but you really have the ability not only to see what's happening with your own business and industry, but your customers' industries. And so that can bring forth best practices, ideas, insights that will hopefully help inform our small businesses as to what's coming, and then, of course, better inform us as to what we can do. So everything from Sarah's comments to how do we clean properly to be able to open up in the future, to what Mark and I think Malcolm were saying about consumer confidence. That's the same thing, right? So how do we take what you've all said along the full spectrum of your businesses and create a platform, a command center, as Malcolm says, to be able to share that information with our business community as they look forward as to how they can open up and quickly get customers back to their commerce. So we will take all of this information, put it together, and share it back with you. In the meantime, for next week, please reach out if you have any questions, if you have any ideas, and we will we'll come back to you with what we would like you to bring to us for the next meeting, but we'll also share responses to some of your comments. So thank you all very much. If you do talk to other small businesses, please invite them to join us next week or to share comments on the email address that Tracy gave out. So with that, we'll wrap it up right at noon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.